friends, welcome back to another video. My name is Millie and today I'm going to be bringing you my quarter one stats for the reading year. So this video is going to cover January, February and March, and we're just going to be talking about all of the kind of books that I've read, the genres, the sort of where I've acquired the books from. I personally really love reading statistics. I just think that they're a really fun thing to look at. I love updating my spreadsheet every time I finish a book, seeing how it changes my stats for the year. So I'm going to be bringing you this video. First of all, happy Torture Poets Department Day. It's not Torture Poets Department Day for you, but it's Torture Poets Department Day for me. I'm filming this on the day that Taylor has released the album. I've been up since 5 AM, listened to the album as soon as it came out, fell asleep for 40 minutes, woke up at 7:20 to find out that she dropped another one. Actually insane. So of course I'm wearing my 1989 merch today in honour, and I love it. I love it. You can check out my reading vlog. I don't know if this will go up before my reading vlog or after, but there'll be a reading vlog where I'm listening to the Torture Poets Department and I'll talk about all my feelings about it in that vlog. But let's just say, I feel like I have potentially a new favourite album in my top three. In my top three Taylor albums, I feel it's in there, which is a big statement. So, and that's only after, you know, having it in the world for a few hours. It hasn't even been in the world for 24 hours and it's already a new favourite, so she just keeps getting better and better. Anyway, that's not what you're here for. You are here for my reading statistics, so let's get into them. Across the months of January, February and March, I read a lovely total of 50 books exactly. This broke down to reading 17 books in January, 15 books in February and 18 books in March. I'm really pleased with this total. This total means that I am on track for my secret goal. I have set a goal on my Goodreads of reading 100 books for the year, purely because I knew I was going to be working a lot more this year and I wasn't really sure how that was going to affect my reading. And so far, my reading seems to be alright at the minute. It seems to be at a steady pace as it has been the past couple of years, and so reading 50 books in the first quarter of the year has kind of meant that I am on track for my secret goal of reading 200 books for the year, because I read exactly 200 books last year, so I do kind of want to achieve that again, if that is at all possible. At the minute, I'm on track, so we'll see. Between January, February and March, I have read a grand total of 20,314 pages. This breaks down to reading 7,229 pages in January, 6,392 pages in February, and 6,693 pages in March. I think it's quite interesting that even though I technically read more books in March, I read a lot less pages than I did in January. So I think that that's quite interesting, seeing how I'm obviously choosing shorter books at the minute. I know that in January I obviously did read the first two Crescent City books. I reread them ahead of the release of House of Flame and Shadow, so that definitely has something to do with it. But I do still think it's interesting that at the minute I don't seem to be reaching for really chunkier books. That is definitely going to change in the rest of the year because, as some of you may know, I really want to be reading Brandon Sanderson this year, and he has some chunky books. Like, I was looking at how many pages The Well of Ascension is, and that's like 763 pages, so that's a lot. And hopefully, as I will hopefully get into reading his books this year, my reads will get chunkier. Might mean that I read a bit less each month, but I will be reading more pages, if that makes sense. And my average rating across January, February, March has pretty much stayed the same. I've been at 3.8 stars from January and March, and I was at 3.7 in February. This is pretty standard for me. Last year my average rating was 3.79 stars, so being at 3.7, 3.8 for the months so far in 2024 is pretty average. I would like it ideally to be higher. I'd love to achieve getting an average rating over the year of over 4 stars, but I find that quite difficult. I think that I've definitely gotten a lot pickier with my 5-star reads. We'll break down the ratings across January, February, March later in the video, but yeah, I haven't been having as many 5-star reads. I've definitely gotten pickier with them. I think just as I'm reading so much more and I'm discovering more about my own reading tastes as well, I'm discovering that I don't want to give 5 stars out willy-nilly, which I definitely used to do a few years ago when my average rating would be above 4 stars. But I also think that it shows that I do need to try and pick some more books that I will definitely enjoy. I think that with reading so much from NetGalley and receiving ARCs and books from publishers, I tend to have some books that I wouldn't necessarily pick up for myself, or books from NetGalley that I've just requested kind of on impulse, which I know is really bad, but that's what I do. And I think that that has possibly meant that I am sometimes picking up books that I'm not necessarily in the mood for, and that affects my ratings. And also possibly that with reading books that I wouldn't necessarily have picked for myself, if I've been sent them unsolicited from a publisher, then it means that, you know, possibly I'm just not in the right headspace for them. So hopefully I'll be able to change that throughout the year and get a slightly higher average rating. At least a 3.9 in 1 month would be nice to achieve. Okay, and then so far in January, February and March in the first quarter, I have not had any DNFs. I've had only 2 rereads, which is quite unheard of for me. I normally have at least 1 a month, I think. But those 2 rereads were the first 2 books of the Crescent City series, ahead of House of Flame and Shadow, because the world is so dense, I really needed a reminder of what was going on. And in January I started 3 series, in February I started 2, and in March I started 2, which is not too bad, I don't think. My tracker doesn't show how many series I finished. I haven't finished that many. I think I finished maybe 5 in the year so far, and that includes April. I need to stop starting series. That is what we've learnt here. A lot of these were just the first books have been released, so it's not too bad. It's not like I've got loads to catch up on. But at the same time, I have so many series that I've started in previous years that I do need to catch up on as well. So that is something to be thinking about for me, I think. Okay, so let's move on to the genres that I've read so far now. As you can see, I have read a lot of fantasy. Fantasy is my favourite genre, so this is absolutely no surprise. I've read 32% of my quarter 1 books in fantasy. That breaks down to being 16 books out of the 50 being fantasy, which is not a surprise. I love fantasy. I love being immersed in other worlds. I love magic, so that's no shock. What was quite a big shock is how many romance books I've read. This has definitely been aided by me reading the entire Chestnut Spring series in the first quarter. I've read 10 romance books, which is 20% of the books that I've read, which is quite a lot, I feel, for someone who, I love romance, but I don't tend to pick it up that much. But having read all of the Chestnut Spring series so far this year, that does obviously mean half of that stat is the Chestnut Spring series, and I'm not mad about it. I love a bit of romance. I love, so it's a fun time. And the other highest genre, or the third highest genre that I've read, was contemporary. This is at 18%, with 9 books being contemporary. This tends to be YA contemporary that I would label this as. Generally, if it's an adult book that could be classed as contemporary, I would label it as litfic. Which, speaking of, I've read 1 book from each of these genres: litfic, horror, paranormal, classics, dystopian and mystery. So those are ones I need to kind of up a little bit more so that they play a bit of a bigger role. But as long as my main genres are here, fantasy and romance, I'm all good. Let's break down my ratings for the year. So across the first quarter of the year, I have had 6 5-star reads, which, as someone who has read 50 books so far this year and is trying, one of my goals for this year is to try and have at least 30 5-star reads in the year. I don't think that 6 is a very good number. I think I'm being too picky, which I do think that one of the books that I've given 4.5 stars is technically a 4.75 star read, and I will talk about that later as one of my favourite reads of the year. And I think that I just need to be a little less picky and just try and pick some more books that I think are 5-star predictions, perhaps. Pick some from my video that I made. And as you can see, I didn't have any 5-star reads in February, which was kind of the issue here with having less 5-star reads. I had 3 in January, 3 in March, 0 in February. That was unfortunate. I don't know what was going on in February, just had a bit of a slump going on. I've had 7 4.5-star reads, one of these being a 4.75-star read, as I said. I've had 17 4-star reads, which I think is really good actually. I am pleased with that number. I think that 4-star is just, I really liked a book. It wasn't, you know, absolute love, but I really liked it. It was a good time, it was well written, you get 4 stars. I've had 5 3.5-star reads and 11 3-star reads. 3 and 3.5-star reads, I don't really know how I differentiate between them, but they're just kind of like average. They are, I liked it, it wasn't anything special, I'm probably going to forget about the plot straight away. 3 stars. I've only had 1 2.5-star read and 3 2-star reads. I haven't had any below 2-star reads so far this year, which I think is really great. That's probably a reason why my average rating so far is pretty high still. I generally don't really tend to give things 1 star. However, I think that it's normally 1 book a year that gets 1 star, and that is just a book that I could not understand how anyone would like it. Purely very poorly written, awful characters, wouldn't understand why anyone would like it. But I haven't had to give that to any book so far this year, which I am really, really pleased about, and I really hope that continues. Sometimes I'm just in a hater mode though, you know. Okay, so now let's talk about where I acquired these books from. As you can see, according to this chart, it looks like the majority is from NetGalley, and I have read 20 books from NetGalley and I'm not mad about it. I have so many NetGalley books I need to read. I need to get that number up, and that is what April is for. That's what I'm doing in April, is trying to get that number of how many I've read from NetGalley up. But actually what you can see is that while NetGalley is the biggest slice, I've actually acquired more books from other sources. They just make up smaller portions. So the next biggest portion is that I've acquired from bookstores. This includes charity shops, so it's not all books that I've bought, but it's clearly quite a lot of books that I've bought. It's 36%, which breaks down to 18 books, and I'm not mad about it, because this doesn't necessarily mean that I have gotten them all from a bookstore this year. I know that a lot of people have a statistic for if it was from their own TBR prior to the start of the year. I haven't included that in my reading tracker, or it wasn't included in the reading tracker that I bought, but I would just like to include where I got them from, and if I got them from a bookstore, it's been included in here. So it's not necessarily all ones I've bought this year, guys. Don't panic. And then the other surprising statistic that I noted about this chart was that I've only read 10%, so 5 books from publishers. That's quite low. I really do need to get that up, because I get sent a lot of books from publishers. If you saw my book haul that I posted recently, I got sent a lot of books from publishers recently. So I really do need to try and get that up, so that publishers will continue sending me books because I'm a reliable reviewer, but also so that I am able to recommend these books more, because if they're being sent from a publisher, generally they're ones that are being published soon. So I'd like to be able to recommend new releases, obviously having actually read them. And then in quite a similar vein, we have the source material, so where I consumed these books. There aren't any audiobooks on here, and I know that a lot of people really love audiobooks. I just have never been able to get into them. I don't have any subscription that allows me to access audiobooks either. I do have Spotify obviously, but as being my Spotify is part of a family account and I'm not the main owner of it, I don't have access to the audiobooks through Spotify that you would get every month. I also don't have Audible or Libby or anything like that, so I don't really have any access to audiobooks. I would like to try some, but the last audiobook that I tried, me and my mum were listening to one and we just could not get along with the narrator, and I think it just really put me off. So yeah, I would like to try them though, because I do a lot of like crafting, and I'd love to be able to consume stories at the same time as doing my crafting, like crochet or anything like that. It just hasn't happened yet. As you can see from this chart, it again looks like the majority of the books I've read have been ebooks. This is at 40%, so this is at 20 books ebooks I'm reading. That's on NetGalley, and actually when you look at the chart it says physical, but then there's also a section for mixture, and any books that are in the mixture category are books that I own physically but were also on my NetGalley shelf. I like to include that so that I can see technically that I'm consuming more NetGalley books than my physical TBR, because NetGalley is really where my priority is at the minute because of how many books I have on there. And then the final graph that I've got is the author status. So this is going to show whether I've read an author before, whether it was a debut, or whether they were just completely new to me, even if it wasn't a debut. As you can see, the majority of the books that I've read in the first quarter of this year have been books by authors that I've read before. I'm really pleased about this because everyone has their preferences, right? Everyone has their preferences for whether they want their year to be consuming new authors, discovering new authors, or whether they want it to be consuming backlists from authors that they love. My year is trying to focus on finishing series as well. So what this graph tells me is that I have been focusing on finishing series and on finishing authors backlists. So to have the majority of the authors I've read this year be ones I've read before, I'm really pleased about. That makes me really happy, even if it is only at 26 books. That's still over half of the books I've read this year being authors I've read before, so I'm really pleased with that. I've also read 9 debut books and 14 books from authors that are new to me, and I think that's a pretty good average. I want it to stay as authors that I've read before being the highest weight of the chart, so hopefully I'll be able to continue with that throughout the year. Okay, and we are now on to my top 5 books of the year so far from the first quarter. So I feel we'll try and go in almost like reverse order. I don't really know necessarily what order these are in apart from what my top book of the year is, and I'm sure you know me, you can guess what book that is going to be. Okay, so one book that I would really love to mention, this wasn't technically a 5-star read, but I think about it all the time. This was my 4.75-star read of the year. It's The Fate Inked in Blood by Daniel L. Jensen. I am seriously debating moving this to be a 5-star read because I loved it so much. This is inspired by Norse mythology. We have Freya, our main character, who is discovered to be the prophesized Shield Maiden. The prophecy is that whoever is in control of the Shield Maiden or who marries her will win the war between the various Viking sort of tribes or factions, and she is taken in by the Viking king Snorri, and he's quite a lot older than her. He marries her, but he's already married and he kind of just wants this marriage to be a front, and she actually has quite a lot of chemistry with his son Bjorn. Bjorn, I love you. This is the Stunning Fairy edition and I devoured this. I just thought it was incredible. Such amazing world building, amazing chemistry between the characters. I really loved how the mythology of the world is explained, and it's just one that I think about constantly, so I do think this might need to be moved to a 5-star read. I don't own this one, but this was a NetGalley art that I read and gave 5 stars. A Demon's Guide to Wooing a Witch by Sarah Hawley. This is the second book in the Glimmer Falls series. The first one was A Witch's Guide to Fate Dating a Demon, and I love that one as well. This series is just turning out to be one of my favourite kind of cozy fantasy series. It's not necessarily cozy fantasy, but it's just delightful. Like, every book is just such a joy to read. They're really funny, and A Demon's Guide to Wooing a Witch was so funny. The banter between the characters was hilarious. I love the world in this. I just can't wait to keep going back, and I cannot wait for the next book in the series as well. So this is definitely one I would highly recommend to pick up. Another one I don't have with me, and I really want to get a finished copy of, is My Throat an Open Grave by Tori Bovolino. I read this on NetGalley, and oh my gosh, if you've been thinking about picking up this book, please pick it up. Insanely good. For only about 200 pages long, this book packs a punch. You are in this atmospheric, dark, creepy, twisted world. You are in these woods that you just never want to leave. The trauma and like the character development that the main character goes through is insane. In only 200 pages, highly recommend. So fantastic. One that I obviously have to talk about is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. This was an easy 5-star read for me. I knew it was going to be a 5-star read from the very first page. And I don't say that about a lot of books. I don't think anyone can say that about a lot of books. But this one, from reading the very first page, I just knew it was going to be 5 stars. The prose is incredible, and I just really love the way that this book described the experience of being human and of like human suffering and just human emotion in general in such a way that it felt like he was talking to you personally. And I cried multiple times while reading this. It was just a book that both breaks you and also heals your soul, and I can't recommend it enough. My first ever Fredrik Backman, and it will not be the last. And of course, we know what my favourite book that I will have read so far this year is going to be Funny Story by Emily Henry. How could it not be? How could it not be Funny Story by Emily Henry? I think that an Emily Henry book has been my favourite book of the year every year for the past couple of years now. And honestly, I can't see anything topping Funny Story. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to all the books I'm going to be reading later this year, but I don't think anything can top it. I think I've peaked in March. This is an Emily Henry romance, which means that it is going to be an emotional romance, and it definitely is. This book has healing and heartbreak. We're following Daphne, who on her fiance's stag do night, he leaves her for his best friend, and she has to move in with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex, Miles Novak. What a man. He is perfection. He is so Nick Miller coded as well. This book is just everything. I just think that Emily Henry just writes masterpiece after masterpiece and just seems to know what book I need to read in the moment and pulls it out my brain, writes it down, and when I have it in my hands, it's exactly what I need. I don't know how she does it. I think that we're just in sync, you know? Funny Story. Best book I have read so far this year. And before we wrap up this video, I have a couple of honourable mentions. So As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow was an incredible book. This is set in war-torn Syria, and this is a really emotional read. This is completely heartbreaking, but also so full of hope. I believe I gave this 4.5 stars, but it's definitely one that I think about a lot, and I would really recommend picking this up. I know a lot of people already have, because when it first came out it completely blew up, so I'm a little late to the party, but if you haven't read it yet, please pick it up. And the final honourable mention is The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is a sort of old YA book. This is like a YA classic from the 2010s, and I have not read them before, but oh my gosh, am I obsessed with this series. This is set in 1920s New York, so we've kind of been like Great Gatsby era, and there's murder mysteries going on, and the characters are really fantastic. It's a great cast of characters. I can see why these books are so beloved by people, and I've read the first two. Can't wait to finish the series, hopefully this year. And that brings us to the end of my Q1 stats video. I hope that you liked this video. I personally love reading stats. I love charts and graphs and calculations of pages read, so I hope that you've enjoyed seeing how the first quarter of my reading year has broke down. Let me know if there's anything you'd like to see in my next one at the end of June, any other kind of statistics you'd want me to include that I haven't included in this one, and I hope that you have a great day. I hope that you are loving the Tortured Poets department as much as I am. Like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye!